Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of this week's episode of This Is Only a Test, and that's Blue Apron. I've been using Blue Apron this entire summer to make meals at home, feeling great about it, and avoiding having to go to the store and not know what ingredients to pick up or buying too many ingredients. Blue Apron, for under $10 a meal, delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals, ingredients that you typically wouldn't have. Blue Apron knows that when you cook with incredible ingredients, you make incredible meals, so they set really high, the highest quality standards for their community of artisanal suppliers, family-run farms, fisheries, and ranchers. Whether it's for ramen noodles or wild-caught Alaskan salmon or heirloom tomatoes, Blue Apron is bringing you the best. In September, some of the meals that they are serving include spicy hoisin chicken stir fry with baby bok choy and sesame ginger cucumber salad, or summer udon noodle salad with cherry tomatoes, corn, and summer sweet pepper, or even paprika spice shrimp and cheddar grits with tomato and sweet corn. Things that without a service like this, I would have no idea how to make by myself. You can check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/test. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. Again, go to blueapron.com/test.
Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, September 8th, 2016, This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.
Hey, let's start the show.
Come. Welcome, everyone, to the last podcast sans Norman Chan, who is still exploring the Arctic, due to arrive back in San Francisco sometime tonight, if you're listening to this on Thursday. We await his return anxiously to hear how it went. I'm Jeremy. With me, as always, is Mayor McCheese.
Hello.
And to his left, making her debut appearance on This Is Only a Test, Annalee Newitz. Hello,
Hi.
Annalee.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with a snack food as well as a human.
Annalee is as a writer on Ars Technica currently. What is your position there?
I am the tech culture editor,
Oh, very good.
but I write about science too. So even though it's technically technology, I get to break out a little bit.
Annalee is one of my favorite writers of all time, especially here in San Francisco. You want to tell us a little bit about your history in writing, especially on some of our favorite sites?
My history in writing.
That feels like a long biography I asked you to tell.
I was born in Southern California, which actually is true. You may know me from the website IO9, which I founded and ran for about 7 years. And then I moved on and ran Gizmodo for about a year before I came to Ars Technica. And I've spent that whole time forcing other people to write about tech and science and culture and doing it myself. I also have a book about surviving mass extinction that came out a couple years ago that Kishore knows about.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the most uplifting book I've ever read, Mass Extinction, but
Is it the subtitle How We'll Survive It, though?
Yeah, it's called Scatter, Adapt, and Remember, How We'll Survive a Mass Extinction. So it has a happy ending. We do survive after much horrible tribulation. And I have a science fiction novel coming out next year.
Oh, cool.
What?
Yeah, it's called...
Who's publishing it?
That's Tor Books.
Yeah.
The excellent Tor Books. And it's called Autonomous, and it's about a pirate and a robot.
Oh, sure.
Have you
Yeah.
written science fiction before?
I have. I've written a number of short stories, but this was my first novel.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was really fun and really scary, but now that it's done, I feel a little bit triumphant. So
I feel like I'm with a little bit of royalty, not to lionize you, but just like IO9 meant so much to me personally, and to be sitting next to one of the founders, I think it's incredible. What are your thoughts on with everything sort of shifting and changing in that landscape, especially with IO9 and Gizmodo, two sites you spent so much time with? Do you have any feelings about where they're going to go now?
I have so many feelings.
Do you have any feelings?
I do have feelings. I mean, like you, IO9 was transformative for me too. It was like a chance of a lifetime to build a site unlike anything else out there. And it was super fun. I met lots of friends through it. And, it's still like a beloved part of my life. But I think that, this past 2 years, with Gawker Media just under siege legally, the outcome was unclear, and I think at least now, I think they've found a good home. We don't know for sure what's going to happen with Univision, but I would much rather have them in the hands of Univision than a lot of the other possibilities. So, I think it's the best of a really scary, terrible situation, not just for Gawker, but for the media in general, that someone like Peter Thiel could just destroy an independent media company. It's pretty scary.
We've talked about that a lot on this show. And because we put this out on video and audio, we have to pretend to be nice to Peter Thiel on air just so we don't get shut down.
Yeah, it's a good policy.
It's a good policy? Okay.
Peter Thiel, beloved leader of the fight for justice online.
And billionaire.
Annalee,
you have also earned a PhD from Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true, yes.
Now we're just going through her CV. This is getting crazy.
You have
this
written
is
for
back in history, yeah.
Wired, Popular Science. I'm so glad someone of your expertise can come on the show and tell us what you think about Pokemon Go on the Apple Watch later.
Yeah, no, I have thoughts.
All right.
I'm a big Pokemon Go fan, so that's, yeah.
Since it's your debut show, I do have a lightning round of 6 questions for you so that our listeners know who they're dealing with for the rest of the show.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind. I'm right. I'm
this should take
prepping.
30 seconds. Star
Okay.
Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
iPhone or Android?
Android.
VR, fad or fantastic?
Fantastic fad.
Oh, nice.
I'm in the middle.
Walk in the line. A book everyone should read.
Ooh.
Not the book, just any book.
Any book you should read.
I can feel my judgment rising.
I review so many books. I would say right now, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, which just won the Hugo. It's a fantastic science fiction novel.
A movie everyone should watch.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
That's so funny that's on Twitter. Like, did you, or no, Rebecca mentioned that.
It was
really?
Still Untitled.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, no, it's on the other Tested podcast just yesterday.
It's a popular...
There you go. Sci-fi.
Yeah.
You call that a rom-com or sci-fi?
I would call it science fiction. It's a little bit dark for a rom-com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, a game everyone should play.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes! Aced it.
All right, Annalee, there were no right answers, but you got them all right.
Excellent.
So on with this show. Wait, do we have any non-pop culture things to cover?
Well, we have some corrections from last week.
Oh, you do.
Again, I made some mistakes. When I was talking about gonorrhea, a topic that comes up from time to time on this show, I was talking about the lack of antibiotics for gonorrhea and some other diseases right now, and how that medical limited availability is a crisis. But I erroneously mentioned that we do not have vaccines for certain other bacterial diseases, which is inaccurate. It was just a slip of the tongue.
Okay. You're forgiven.
Thanks for correcting that.
Welcome to the podcast where there's lots of transitions, Annalee.
Mayor McCheese,
Oh, yes.
you're back from DragonCon.
Yes.
The convention of dragons.
This is my favorite con of the year. I'm assuming you've never gone, Jeremy.
No, I'm scared of dragons.
You've gone before.
I have, and I love dragons. Ask me any dragon question.
Any dragon-related question?
Yeah.
Are you pro or anti-Smog really hoarding all that gold? Because I feel like he should have redistributed some of that gold to other dragons in the area, but he was very much a hoarder.
Yeah, I don't know how many other dragons there were in the area. It's a myth, I think a stereotype that dragons are hoarders. Not all dragons are hoarders, but
not all
he is. So I think it's true to his nature.
Puff wasn't a hoarder.
No.
It's amazing that in 9 hours of film we couldn't find out more than one dragon. But DragonCon, I just got back. I think it's my favorite con of the year. It's a con that was started as a fan con, really with lots of tracks of fandom, so you can get like your DC, your comics, your Whedonverse, your alt history. I went to obviously be on the science track, but I also delved into a lot of other tracks like EFF and space. And this is my first time going to a con where I really embraced my inner cosplayer in a significant way. So the first day I was on a couple panels about The Expanse. And so I went as Alex from The Expanse, which is always great.
Good
I had
call.
the beard for it. It was wonderful talking about all of the ways that science interacts with that show. I love that show. I only wish that the Corey twins, as I call them, were there as well. They had skipped the con this year. And then day 2, I was a stonecutter from The Simpsons. I joined that mythical group. And there's many videos online of Frank and I wandering the floor singing the Stonecutter song that you can find. But my favorite one was I went as Mayor McCheese, an outfit that I dutifully built by hand. It is janky and terrible, and I've never high-fived that many people in my life. And there's always, like, you hear Adam on a lot of things talk about, his commitment to detail, but that cosplay is for everyone. That you don't need that level of perfection and craft he brings. But, working here, it's intimidating to work next to him and Frank and feel like that license to go out there with the kind of craft and skill I have, which involves like pins and gumption. And
felt.
Yeah, lots of felt. I put it together with just some batting and fabric, and I cut the foam for it using my turkey carver, like my electric knife.
Nice.
So it was all very like...
What did you use for source material?
Just Google image search. There's a 70s cartoon. It might have been the early 80s. Live cartoon series with Mayor McCheese in it. He was doing the hustle on the floor when Ronald and the other folks meet him. It's a very trippy experience.
There was a McDonald's TV show?
There's a McDonald's cartoon.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it was great. I led a couple panels as Mayor McCheese, which was pretty funny and hilarious. And I think most of my colleagues didn't know it was me inside this costume for like a day or two, which is one of my favorite parts. But I had an absolute blast. And I really recommend that con if you're into cosplay, or if you're just into deep dives into fandom without the sort of celebrity-ness that can clog up the works at some other cons.
It's in the East Coast, right?
It's in Atlanta.
Atlanta.
It was 90 and humid, but this con takes place inside hotels, a series of interconnected hotels, so it was not bad.
And there's also an incredible parade, right? In the middle of the con.
Of cosplayers?
Of cosplayers, and it's huge, and it's through downtown Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
And you've never seen so many stormtroopers and so many Darth Vaders
And my favorite thing that I discovered is there's a group of red shirts that will go and slowly die, and their numbers dwindle as the parade goes on. There's even
awesome.
a group of... There's the entire periodic table of the elements walks in this parade. It's so bizarre and beautiful. And like 80,000 people show up for that parade. In
like just the
Atlanta.
locals. This is an event for the kids to come see. That's
It's
awesome.
Geek Pride.
When did you march?
I didn't because I can barely last a half hour
Oh, your cooling
to
system.
an hour in that costume. I think I posted a picture on Twitter where like basically my upper torso is just soaked and you can see it because I was wearing like a 70s prom shirt with like a velour jacket and a bow tie and a vest and spats and pants, all of these things in addition to the head.
Commitment.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Highly recommend that con. Frank was also there. Mm-hmm. He had a proton pack that he built, but he built it out of foam instead of the normal component. So instead of weighing about 30 pounds, it was 8. It was really beautiful. We'll see. I think we're going to try to make a video about it in the future. And he also brought some of the episode 7 props that he built to share on a panel. So it was great seeing Frank out there. Met a lot of Tested fans. Shout out to Corey and Anthony and so many more that I can't remember the names of. But thanks for coming up and saying hi. And I hope you had as wonderful a con as I did.
Cool. I know you're excited about one of the announcements there involving the X Mythbusters side team, right?
Yeah, I think they were called the Build Team.
The Build Team, that's it.
It was Tori, Grant, and Carrie. Announced that they have a new show debuting on Netflix on December 9th. It's called the White Rabbit Project, and it's supposed to detail them going down the rabbit hole on numerous builds. I think in a similar vein as what you saw in Mythbusters, but it sounded like from the panel, it's a little bit more depth. Like they aren't just doing shorter segments; it's going to be long segments.
Cool.
This time, so
they
I'm
had
really
great
excited.
chemistry, so that's a natural fit. I mean, they can just hit the ground running.
Sounds good.
Technology. So we have just really two things we're going to cover in the technology section this week.
Two small things.
Two very small things from two very small companies called Apple and Sony. This morning, they were both of these events, so we covered them and then more or less live, rushed over here to the podcast, and now we're going to review some of the topics. So I just as an overarching review of the Apple event, I was slightly underwhelmed. I was hoping for something more maybe that we hadn't heard of yet, and not to say there weren't anything, but there just wasn't any new hardware that we hadn't ever anticipated. They launched off with what I thought was the most exciting thing of the show, which was Mario is actually coming to iOS, to the App Store. People have said for a long time now that Nintendo need to embrace mobile because that's clearly where people are going to play their games now. The 3DS has, seen its ascendancy, and now they need to just embrace it, just deal with it. And apparently they're finally on board. They had Miyamoto himself come out and introduce what was it called? Super Mario Run, which is a one-tap Mario game. Are you guys excited about this at all?
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to muster up some enthusiasm.
Is this because
but
you don't use iPhones?
Yeah, that does have an impact for me.
I have an iPhone and I use it largely for video and photos. So
Not gaming.
not
Yeah.
gaming, not for anything real.
Actually,
No.
where you lost me was it's a one-tap game. It's a game where basically Mario just runs and
Automatically.
You have to just deal with him.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have to make him jump and swoop and maybe do the little spin in the air to get all the coins. I mean, there's some pretty decent one-tap games out there, and
Yeah.
if Mario is in this game, they're going to release it in a solid state. I mean, this is not some outsourced thing. Niantic was an outsourced thing, and it did all right with Pokemon Go, but this is Mario, so they're going to do it in-house. They're going to keep it real, and they're going to release it when it's finished. I have high hopes for it. I mean, I can't say that I play that many iOS games anymore, but for the times that I do, this is probably going to be the one that I go to. Maybe you guys aren't huge.
What's wrong with one-tap games? I'm
Yeah.
not understanding the hate. There's Temple Run, which is like the greatest one-tap game ever.
It's not
Pokemon
that I'm
Go.
anti one-tap games. I'm just like for Mario's debut on a whole new platform.
What would you have
I
them
wanted
do?
something more full feature.
Like what? But then it would have to use a gamepad. They have to embrace. Nintendo
Yeah, it has
knows
to be
interface.
the mobile interface.
No,
Yeah.
Nintendo knows interface better than anybody, so that because they've innovated probably better than the other platforms. They really care about it. So they looked at touch phones, and they said, well, we don't want to cover the screen with people's fingers. We don't want to require a gamepad, so we'll just do something really simple. Now, maybe if it pays off for them, they'll experiment further. I'm happy about that. Unfortunately, that's the most happy I was the entire event.
Is this your general feeling too, Annalee? That that this was underwhelming?
It was underwhelming. The doubling down on the watch was just, what the hell?
Yeah.
Nobody wants that watch yet. And, it just felt like pushing more of the thing that we're all least excited about. And frankly, the watch is still basically a test case. It's kind of, okay, here's the things you could do with a watch if it really worked, or if there really were a lot of apps for it that were fully integrated with each other. And so I don't know. Yeah.
So let's talk about the specifics.
I don't want to alarm you, but Jeremy has a watch on right now.
And that's fine.
Hey, if I didn't, we'd just be one-sided here. This is the nice thing about panels.
Yes, this is your week. I had my week last week.
So they're calling it the Series 2. It has basically the same footprint design as the first Apple Watch, which apparently is the Series 1 now. It is, except they've added, the main new feature is GPS. So everyone, which we all kind of, people, if you follow the Apple blogs, everyone kind of anticipated. So now, I guess the use case is if you don't have your phone, it knows exactly where you are, and you can go on a run, and it can be very accurate. I don't personally do that. I use it for some fitness stuff, but it's either at the gym or in like badminton. So I'm not doing a whole lot of GPS activities.
I gotta say though, in true Apple fashion, I was blown away by the one use case where they talked about going hiking offline using the GPS, and I was like, I would totally use that 2 days out of the year. I mean, like there's that part that doesn't work, but I thought that feature and the way they showcased it was in beautiful Apple style, and I thought that was a great integration of the watch's GPS in a way that would actually benefit my life.
But isn't this really only useful if you don't have your phone? I mean, would you go on that hike without your phone?
No, but if you're in Yosemite, it was the offline nature, and like you don't want to get out your phone while you're hiking.
You don't need it, though.
Why not?
But your phone, your watch syncs with your phone.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
I mean, I do that all the time. Offline maps on my phone. Like I don't mind reaching into my pocket. It's not. It isn't really that much harder than looking at my wrist.
But you can get like tap through details on the waterfall that you're seeing.
You like that part, did you?
I'm being a little facetious about it, but like I thought that the presentation, that was the only place in the presentation where I was like, hey, that's kind of cool.
I liked the integration of Pokemon Go with fitness features
because
I do because I actually, for real, I mean, I wear a Fitbit and I often do kind of look at it and look at my Pokemon Go scores at the same time. I've definitely, I mean, I think a lot of us have said to ourselves, well, but this game allows us to go outside and move around. So it's not like those other dastardly games where we sit on the sofa all the time and just move our fingers. And so it kind of made sense to me that would be integrated. It's like further gamification of exercise, which is great. It totally works for me. As for the actual functionality of it, no. I mean, it felt to me, again, like I said before, like it was sort of saying, this is how we imagine apps would work together once we have enough apps to make this really make sense. So I liked the idea that you could take a game and integrate it with fitness. It seemed like a good suggestion to future developers of ways they could think about how they want to integrate with the functionality of the watch. But am I really going to play Pokemon Go on an Apple Watch? No. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, which is I'm going to look at my Fitbit and I'm going to look at my phone and I'm going to, do it that way. And I don't see that as being that much of a problem.
Yeah. I think it's a little strange that you can't just use the watch with Pokemon Go either. Like you still have to use the phone. It's really just a little alert system.
I mean, you can see your little Pokemon on the watch.
Right.
I like
but
that.
You can't catch ones. Like if you go to a new stop, I guess you can spin the Pokestops and get the little items.
Yeah, and that's significant.
That's significant.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, until you can have a watch without a phone, why are we doing this?
Well, and that was the big rumor, is that they lost the momentum or the contracts. They couldn't pull it off to actually have cellular built into this version of the watch. Mm-hmm. And so if that's true, internally, all they had left to fall on was the GPS feature. And we hopefully would be looking forward to full cellular features next year.
I have to say, though, I'm used to Apple being slightly ahead of the curve, and it felt like the amount of time they devoted to Pokemon felt like they were just missing a wave.
Yeah.
And
right, because it's already
Pokemon's
peaked.
already peaked, and it's kind of in decline a little bit. And to spend, whatever, it was like 10 minutes.
I felt like that's how I felt about a lot of the presentations today. It was a 2-hour event. There wasn't a whole lot of meat here. Anyway, it has a 2x faster GPU. It has a 50% faster dual-core processor. It's now more waterproof, so it can now go down to 50 meters. If you're a swimmer, it looks kind of cool because it actually will count your laps in the pool. That I thought was interesting. I mean, that your hand is moving so much while swimming. They must be doing some interesting calculations to actually detect when you turn. and spin around 180 degrees.
Well, the GPS is going to help with that too.
But internally, like in a swimming pool, you would have to be outdoors for GPS to work.
Right, that's true. I was imagining an outdoor pool.
They do have those.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I grew up in California, so I was like, "What?
Right.
What is this indoor pool that you speak of?"
My kids do swim lessons in an indoor pool.
Is it in the watch squirts water out?
That was my favorite thing about the watch.
I want that integrated with Pokemon.
Right.
Pokemon squirt.
To explain, they talked a lot about how they redesign like the O-rings and the seals to make this thing waterproof. But there's one place you can't make it waterproof, which is the speaker, because it needs air to run. And they showed how the speaker, when it's submerged in water, will essentially, the cavity will fill up with water, and then the speaker itself will come on after you emerge out of the water and use its vibration and air pressure to push the water out of the speaker holes.
That's pretty neat.
It's pretty badass. I think that's awesome.
It was my favorite thing of the entire Apple presentation. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's going to work perfectly.
But it's nice because, Internet of Things or connected devices or whatever the heck we're going to call it, that's the kind of thing that we actually should be seeing innovated. Is like, how can we keep things dry using weird devices like speakers? I like that. It felt cool.
Yeah, it feels like a dog getting out of the tub and having to shake it all off.
Yeah, it felt like an unexpected weird thing that they had done.
Unexpectedly, they are keeping the old watch, so you'll be able to get that for $100 less, and they're upgrading the processors on that. So if you don't care about GPS, there's now a much better deal on the Apple Watch.
How much, Jeremy?
The old watch with the dual core will be $269, the new watch $369. Plus, there's the new Nike version. I don't know, there's a whole other version of the watch with Nike features and a special Nike design. I don't know. That's not for me. I'm not a runner, but I guess if you're a runner, that also will cost $369.
So, as somebody that has what is now essentially the Series 1 watch, do you see any reason to upgrade?
I'm having a hard time with it. Because what I understand is I actually haven't upgraded to the new iOS 10s, the new OSs across my ecosystem. And from what I understand, like, that is great. Like, so the watch stuff especially, they've completely redesigned. They've rethought what the buttons do, some of the interfaces. And so I'm looking forward to that much more so than I would be the new hardware. And that all comes out this month. Gosh, they did announce the iOS release date. September 13th. So that's just a few days away. So moving on from the Apple Watch.
Now that you've gotten our meh on the watch, our official meh review.
I'm hoping, I really thought the first watch would be the ugly one. And then, because they iterate so quickly in the early versions of hardware, I would thought the next watch would have been exciting and thin and beautiful. And it just isn't yet. So, one more year, hopefully. The iPhone 7. Surprise! Like, we heard that they would not be changing much. Like, most of the industrial design would remain the same.
There's one thing we've been talking about too much that we knew was going to change.
One thing that was banned from this show, from discussion, which we now have to discuss. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
But they did actually. It is a slightly different design. It's more there's more curvature around the phone. It's now more of a unibody design. The lens area has a curvature around it. But it also now comes in a new color. They have a new finishing technique. They call it jet black. By the way, the jet black version only comes in the larger capacities. That's strange. So they have a shiny black, a matte black, and then the silver and gold, and what else? Another one. The new home button. I guess that's like the most exciting thing to me about it. They've completely redesigned it. It's force sensitive. It's solid state. It's a taptic home button, not unlike the new MacBook Pros. Do either of you have is that a new MacBook Pro?
No.
Have you heard about the new touchpad? Where when you tap it, it feels like you're pressing, but it doesn't. Like, it just pushes back on you in a taptic kind of way. It feels really cool. So I'm kind of excited about that, to be able to make different sensations when you touch the home button. But I touch the home button so rarely. That's the thing. It's like they use the home button for so much that
you want to try?
Maybe it'll be useful. Ooh. Oh, is this the new MacBook?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got it.
Just press down.
It's water.
that force
I
that you're
can't
feeling.
even tap it though. Why do they call it taptic if I have to push it?
Taptic is the haptic feedback engine.
I know, but I want to tap.
But if
have
you
to
press it
actually
down, you
push.
feel a little bit like it's depressing.
No, it does.
It's
Yeah, for
actually
sure. It
not.
feels just like, I mean, here I have an old school Air.
Me too. Feels the same way.
But on this one, you can tap. Sorry, I don't mean to be harping on that. But
We're going to get into the semantics
one goes
of the
to a
name of this engine.
So it's now waterproof, and much like the watches, it's also dust proof, that's kind of interesting, given that I imagine that there was this little bit of Apple revenue coming from repairs.
Water resistant.
That's same as the watch, but that's a technicality because they can't call it waterproof since it's this level of water resistance, which is a 50-meter water resistance. I mean, that's pretty substantial. It's essentially waterproof. So if you drop your phone in the lake, you're probably out of luck anyway. But if it goes in a pool or a bathtub, you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Or toilet, which
Or
is
toilet.
more realistic scenario.
Right. Has that happened to you?
I mean, hasn't it happened to everyone?
It's happened to someone.
It happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it was me, but someone, yeah.
But the camera was the big improvement, as always, especially with these. I guess usually the cameras come on the S cycles, so I'll be interesting to see what they do next year. But the this camera is now optical image stabilized on both versions. So that was the big one. If you got the Plus last time, or the Plus version, the large, is that what they call it? S.
Yeah.
So there's the S's and the Pluses. Now I'm getting confused.
No, we're on the plus
We're on the
cycle.
pluses.
Yeah, 7 and
Right.
7 Plus.
Right. So the larger phone, the Plus, if you got that one last year, it was image stabilized. Now it is even on the standard version. It's also, of course,
And the OIS is great. It was great on the 6 Plus when we tried it out on Norm's phone. It works if you take a lot of photos. I think it's a great feature for it to extend to both models.
it's great. It's good for improves low light photography, but it won't help if your subject is moving. Like, you're going to do a longer exposure, which by definition means if your subject is moving, it's going to get blurry. So yeah, it'll help, but it will only help stabilize your hand, not the subject matter. Just keep that in mind. It has a f1.8 aperture, 60% faster sensor, brighter flash. It now has a RAW API, which I think Norm's going to be interested in. He loves shooting RAW whenever possible. So now third parties will be able to use the RAW data. Has a higher res FaceTime camera. I don't think many people care about that. Like, 5 megapixel was enough. Now it's 7. But the big improvement is with the Plus model. So this is the technology that we've been hearing about. That was rumored. I think they bought a company where they got all this technology from. It is a 2-sensor camera. And there are actually 2 lenses, one that's wide angle, one that's telephoto. And by default, it just uses the one. It just uses the wide angle. That's your 1x. And if you tap this little new button that's on the screen, you'll switch lenses and you'll go to the telephoto. So you can essentially get an optical zoom in a sense, but only to these, like, it's binary. You can get one or the other. And you can't zoom between them. But they've liked this so much that now you can get so much closer with optical. They've improved the digital zoom to like a 10x. So they showed on screen, that you could get quite close to subjects, and it looks cool. But the neat feature about this, in my mind, is this new portrait mode. Did you guys see this? So if there's now a new setting, if you go to the camera, where instead of panorama, instead of movie or slow-mo, there's a new one called portrait, and that will use both sensors to detect depth, in a sense. So they'll be able to scan the image, and this is really just intended for portraits, and you can take a picture, and it will detect where the person is, and it will keep them in focus, but then detect what's behind them and blur that out, just as if you shot on a larger SLR full-frame camera, that kind of thing, to create this bokeh effect in the background. Now, that's something that you just can't do with a lens by itself on a cell phone. Just physics get in the way. But I have high hopes for this to actually, because I feel like the point-and-shoot market has largely been converted to cell phones at this point. This is a chance, maybe generation or two from now, when this really becomes good, if it's, we'll see how it is this year, that it could actually start to diminish the SLR market.
So it's only been a couple hours since this came out. So I haven't seen any reactions from photographers. How into photography are you guys?
I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
I have an
Not
I have
too-
an SLR. I have a full frame now. I just got the new Sony.
Would this make you question buying an SLR? Are we at that point yet where this will do what you're saying?
Well, I got it because I needed to shoot photos for my kids' school. I needed to archive the artwork that's on the walls, and I think I still want a nice camera for that. But in terms of like hobbyist people who get an SLR to do family photos, I think that could diminish this. I really do, especially if it works. I mean, no, and by the way, this is not a feature that's going to be ready at launch. That was unanticipated. We assumed that it would be. It's going to be a free feature that they're going to release later this year as a download.
And I would say, as a non-photographer, I mean, I use my iPhone 6 for my journalism. When I go out on site, I'm using it to do video, and it's completely replaced a camera for me. I do have an SLR, an old one, and I would way rather use the iPhone at this point. So,
Was there anything in this that makes you want to upgrade your camera, though?
it was the camera, and that was the one thing that I was talking about this with my colleagues at Ars Technica, and we were all kind of agreeing, like, wow, maybe we kind of do want to upgrade because the camera is so great. And, maybe one day I'll actually use the phone as a phone.
Right.
I mean, I sometimes switch over to it when I want to, but I just like the Android.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like the portrait mode was great. I don't know about the use case of that with like the depth of field. How often hobbyists are even going to use that? I think the zoom is probably where it's at.
Yeah, the zoom, I agree.
Because you get 2x optical and then up to 10 using their sort of software capability.
Up from 5 in the old
And
one.
so digital zoom has always stunk. Mm-hmm. You're just zooming in on pixels, but there's a way, at least in their demo, it showed that because it was stitching together two pictures essentially, that you get a better digital zoom experience than what you've had in the past.
I'm just excited about the portrait mode from a tech standpoint because it's kind of magic that they're sensing depth using these two lenses, and I dig the engineering behind that, and I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in it too. And so I'll be curious to see how good that bokeh effect is. Currently, like if you try to use your iPhone to shoot something that's really close to the camera and you tap on it to focus on it, you can get a blurred out background. And it looks pretty great. Like when we first were able to start doing that, I was like, that's amazing that a phone can even do that. So if we can now do that easier and better, I'm super excited about that. That's one of the things I like so much about the full frame cameras is that effect.
Also great for selfies.
Well...
Depth of field selfie, yes.
I can, as you were talking about that, and you're giving the whole, beautiful, eloquent tale of how this is going to give us perfect portraits. I was like, yeah, it's going to be for selfies.
Well,
I mean, those are the portraits of today. All right, that's where we're at.
I think you're probably right. It's only a matter of time before that is on the front of the phone too. Like literally, that will be what makes selfies look awesome.
Yeah. It's fine. It's all going to be okay.
It has stereo speakers. So I'm a kind of an audio nut in some ways that apparently other people aren't. Excuse you.
Speaking of speakers.
Yeah, right. So I'm excited about that. I had read somewhere that they are using one of the microphones ports as a speaker as well. That was like one of those things that were rumored from one of the suppliers. I'm not sure if that's what they ended up doing. But I think that's cool. I know it's a very small thing, and maybe stereo won't matter to a lot of people, but I dig it. But it's going to be interesting because I wonder if it'll flip the left and the right. It must. It must base it on how it should be. So like if you flip your phone around, it'll swap the image and do the right sound.
I don't want to be snarky because
snarky.
There's too many people that are snarky about like tech launches. But this is the feature I was like, this is the most worthless thing I heard.
What, stereo speakers?
Yeah, the stereo speaker.
See, I know some people don't care. That's fine.
Just because it's like, do I need stereo over 5 inches? Like, it's
Why
such a
not?
small area.
No, I dig it. I dig it.
I think I don't think there's anything bad about it. I mean, if you can do it, do it. It's not going to, I don't think anyone's going to buy it for that.
Have you ever mixed audio before? Have you recorded musicians and mixed a song or something like that?
No.
Because having done that before, I care. Like I know how much thought sound engineers put into where the sound is spatially, that I want to at least respect that with a stereo.
Yeah,
signal.
when you crush it down to mono, it's just sad.
Yeah.
It's just,
Unless it's a Beatles album. In which
Yeah.
case, those were the original mixes.
Yeah, exactly. Unless it was original to mono, which is nothing now. So
All right. Kishore, what was that topic that we couldn't ever talk about on the podcast?
It's okay. I'm okay. I steeled myself for this day to come. That one day we would live in a post-headphone jack world.
You don't, right? You got a headphone jack.
No, because I live in the sensible world where people have invested a lot in headphones, and we don't want to see that headphone jack leave.
You know what you lack? Courage.
yeah, courage and a vision of tomorrow. All right.
Phil Schiller had the unenviable duty of going up on stage and pitching this to the world of why we needed to lose the headphone jack. And that's what he said. He said the reason Apple's doing it is really threefold, and it's about courage, people, because we had to, we wanted additional features for one. Like we needed, I don't even remember the example that they gave, but if we have a lightning jack connector for our headphones, then we can use the data on the phone to control more about how it sounds, I guess. We have space issues because there's just not enough space in the phone to add new hardware with that big jack there, right? So we can combine everything in Lightning, then we can add more features. Anyone convinced yet?
No. I mean, this is USB-C all over again. I mean, they want it to be wireless. They want us to buy new headphones, right? I mean, that's really, I mean, this is a classic Apple move. You know, we had to do this. This is us being courageous. This is you buying a pair of, what is it, $150 for 5 hours of headphone?
That would be on sale.
That would be
I think they're actually at
They're $159. They were $159.
yeah, 160. So, you know.
$159.
Yeah, $159. I'm dubious. It's so, every time I hear AirPod, I keep wanting to call them AirBuds. Did you guys ever see the movie AirBud?
I have seen the movie AirBud.
Basketball playing dog.
It's the best dog basketball movie out there.
Right. And so I'm just going to call these AirBud in
Right
my
on.
mind. I think that's where we need to go.
I think you're right. They want us to buy those headphones, but I think even more than that, this is like they get a licensing fee every time somebody uses the Lightning connector. You can't use it. You can't build your own Lightning connector without licensing that spec from Apple.
Yep.
So like that's a lot of money.
And they have this new wireless spec too. What's up with that?
Well, they have their own chip now, the
Their
W1.
own, right.
Yeah, I think that's just their own hardware. So they're introducing that. I'm sure next year we'll see the W2.
Let's get into it. We got to talk about the wireless because I was actually, as much as I've hated on the headphone jack getting away.
Yep.
Part of the reason I talked about it going away being problematic is I think the experience of wireless with your phone has largely stunk. Like the idea of pairing and repairing and distance and connectivity has not been very seamless. And if Apple does get credit for doing things right, it's that their user experience is usually, bar none. So
Yeah.
let's get into these wireless AirBuds.
Okay.
Totally calling them that.
All right. Well, so this is a separate product. This does not come with the phone. This is if you want to have wireless AirBuds, you pony up $159 and you get these, what look like the ends of the original Apple earbuds that just have the wires cut off, and they have a bunch of sensors in them. They can tell when they've been inserted into your ear, and they turn on. They have microphones built into them. They have, for some reason, they have dual accelerometers.
I didn't get that.
I think that must be for future applications, yeah, because maybe it can be used as part of a fitness type thing, or
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe I'm nodding to Siri or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, nodding
That
and
would be
shaking
cool.
your head.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. So or just again, like if it's an accelerometer, it can be telling you like you're walking. I mean, I don't know why you would want that though, because you already have that in your phone
Or your watch.
Or your watch. Well, or it can measure the force that you use to take it out of your ear and throw it at the wall. It doesn't work.
Well, they're so small. Like I saw somebody on Twitter say they've already lost 2 of them. They haven't even bought them yet.
Yeah, that's my chief concern about these is they are small, and I love earbuds. That's my primary headphone. They fall out all the time.
Yeah.
And everyone will tell you like, oh, I have weird ears. That's the thing. Everyone's ears are weird. They're all a little bit different. So I'm really interested to see fit and how well they stay in, because they are going to be really easy to lose.
Especially with the little dangly bit sticking out, right? Like, so anytime
Yeah.
you even move your head around, it might catch on your collar. They're not deep inside your ear. It's not like a
Right.
hearing aid.
You wouldn't want to like lay on a pillow with these on.
No,
I imagine.
no, you're not going to do that. I mean, it's interesting that they didn't even go with sort of an over-the-ear kind of your classic, Bluetooth kind of setup. That it's just, we've made these as losable as possible. Is that a word, losable?
I thought that the case was cool. Like the
Case was cool.
So the little Apple, what do they call them? AirPods. They have 5 hours of listening charge built into them. And when you run out of charge, if you put them back in the case, which looks like a tiny little, I don't know, it's smaller than the case for the original Apple earbuds. They recharge in the case. The case is a battery pack, and the case can hold 20.
It was like 24 hours.
24 hours of listening power in there. I thought that was neat. That was a good use of the case. You won't lose the case because you'll be using it.
The case seemed great, and then they showed how you essentially have to pair this once with the case.
You like that pair? Yeah, the pairing was good.
No, the pairing one time I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But they said, like, you don't have to worry about auto connection. You don't have to hit anything.
Yeah.
It just does it.
You put it next to your phone, you open the case, and then you just hit connect on your phone. Done.
If that's the way it actually works,
Great.
that's fine.
Yeah. All right. So that's the AirPods. But as far as the phone, it actually ships with Lightning earbuds and an adapter for your 3.5 millimeter phono jack. So that, you know what I kind of wish that they would do is just have like a big bucket in Apple stores. People could just go grab a handful of these adapters and plug them into all of their headphones, because that's what I would want. Because the chances of me having this adapter on hand when I need it are slim to none.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about this, people. What else do we got? Let's
talk about the innards.
Yeah,
of the phone.
so there's a new chip, of course. They call it the A10. It's a quad-core processor. They've extended the battery life, but not necessarily with a bigger battery. They have now a new thing in there where there's this quad-core, but 2 of the cores are high efficiency, and 2 of them are high performance. So it'll use whatever it should. Then there's like this, police chip in there that decides what processes get put on what cores. So apparently they're saying, quote, longest battery life ever in an iPhone. So that's good. Has a 50% faster GPU, of course. It can support 400 flying monkeys in the Wizard of Oz game. Just a lot of flying monkeys. And that's it. Prices to be expected, $649 for the iPhone 7.
Actually, it's a little less than I predicted. We were chatting along as the thing was going. I thought it was going to be an $800 phone.
Well,
for the
Plus. The Plus is $769.
That's $800. Come on.
And they have doubled all the capacity. So thank God, long
Yeah,
gone,
no 16
gigabyte. Quick joke up there when he threw it up on the screen.
I bet you those pictures are going to eat up that 32 gig like it's nobody's business. So even the 32 is going to be obsolete real quick.
Yeah, if you're using it for photos, you can always do the iCloud thing where everything is just backed up. But honestly, I've always thought it was interesting that the lowest capacity requires the most tech-savvy. Pre-order start, same as the watch, September 9th, available on the 16th. The AirBuds are available late October.
So, final thoughts on this Apple event?
I've owned every single phone that they've made. And I've done that. I haven't been sure I wanted to do that the past few US cycles. But this is the first year I'm thinking, if I do it, it's really just out of like some sort of technical problem that I have.
Look at your body language as you're saying this. I guess.
It's just there's not a whole lot of sexy there, and I'm losing the headphone jack, and I am not convinced by their arguments. That was the one I was curious to see how they would spin it, because they can't say it's losing anything. It has to be a feature, and so I just don't know. I'm curious about the camera, but only on the bigger one. So not only would I have to upgrade the phone to something I'm not terribly excited about, but I have to get the big one, and I like my small phone.
Annalee?
I am also not really convinced. I've already admitted I'm an Android person anyway, but I might for the camera. We'll see. Maybe wait to the next S cycle, though. I think.
Yeah, I wonder.
I still have the 6, and I'm good with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's basically a $770 really nice camera with a phone attached to it.
Yeah.
And it's just too much for me to jump the hurdle. I'm intrigued by the wireless headphone software. I'm less convinced about the AirBuds.
The wireless headphones will presumably work with the older phones, so you could go ahead and experience that. Do you have an iPhone? Do you have an iPod?
No, my
iPad?
wife has an iPhone.
Okay.
So I'm actually not as sour on this whole event as I thought I was going to be going in, given all the rumors and stuff, because the camera, if it does hold the potential they say, is a pretty important upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the dual lenses does take hold, I might be a buyer like Annalee come the S cycle, especially if that dual camera rolls out to the other models.
That's what I want. I want it on a smaller phone.
Yeah, I think I might be in at that point, hoping that some other progresses are made. But it's not in their top tier of announcements ever, for sure.
And there were no other announcements. That was it. We got an encore performance with Sia. We did
Sure.
not. We didn't.
Yes, lovely.
We didn't see anything about the new MacBooks, which that would have had at least some interesting technology if they put that touchpad across the top. I'm curious.
Or even talked about ARM processors,
how they use
which
that.
they haven't.
One day, they'll announce a touch screen, but I don't expect that this year.
That's
But
not happening.
Well,
not happening.
They're the
They
only
gotta compete
ones,
with the Surface.
They're the only ones left on the planet not making a touch screen. Laptop. They've got to do it anyway. That was it for the Apple event. Let's move on to Sony. Do either of you own a PlayStation 4?
I have a PS3, 2, and 1.
Wow.
That's right.
Old school. What's your favorite PlayStation 1 game?
Ooh, It's all like a blur. Because my favorite PlayStation game of all time was Final Fantasy VII on the PS2. No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt. But I'm trying to remember what I even had on the one.
I never had a PlayStation 1 or 2. But I rented them, and I played Ridge Racer, and I loved it. I'm a big fan of driving games, and I love that little skidding mechanic they had in that.
But I bought the 3 because it was going to be it was also going to be a media station before all these other devices like Roku's and what were on the market.
Yeah.
And then when the 4 came out, I was like, meh. It was there wasn't anything there for me.
Mm-hmm. Are you a gamer, Annalee?
Not really. I mean, on my phone, I can totally kick your ass at Temple Run. Pokemon Go, I'm there. But yeah, I'm not really, I don't do a lot of console gaming.
Yeah.
I'm mostly just watching
You have a PS4.
TV and movies.
You have a PS4 though, Jim.
Yeah,
I do.
tell us.
I do, yeah, and it gets hot. We have it in a cabinet, and I hear the fan on all the time. It gets super hot in there. So I'm a little intrigued by the new PS4. It is not the Slim. It is just PS4, and that was the real quick off the bat announcement they had today. It's going to be available this month, right? Almost everywhere. Next week, and it's just that's the new PlayStation. You go to buy in a PS4, you're going to get this one. It looks remarkably small. I mean, we didn't get a good look at it. There's a couple promotional shots. I mean, it's not much bigger than a handful of controllers. I mean, it's a tiny little guy. So I'll be curious to see what kind of heat that puts out.
$300, pretty affordable.
Yeah.
No reason to buy.
Well, no reason to upgrade. But if you're going to buy PS4 now, it's that's an incentive. Okay, I get the cool one, and presumably it doesn't put out as much heat either. So that would be good for my little cabinet. And they didn't announce any new features of it. The new Xbox actually supports 4K Blu-ray. Presumably this does not. You didn't see anything about that, right? Mm-mm. Okay. So most of the event was spent, and this is literally 2 hours ago, on the PS4 Pro, which is the 4K system.
My favorite part is they use the word hardcore gamers as the phrase introducing this thing. They definitely were slicing the market. They're basically if you're a casual gamer, which is basically this end of the table, you're out.
But this is not the PS5.
No, it's not. It's the PS4.5. They call it the PS4 Pro, and it's really about having a 4K system with enhanced GPU. So we'll go through the specs real quick. They didn't say anything about the GPU outside of it. It's twice as powerful.
Mm-hmm. It's twice as powerful, but it has to output 4 times the pixels. Okay.
This is true.
So I wonder what that means. I would need some graphics experts to tell me.
They talked a lot about 1080p. about how this is going to look incredible on any 1080p screen and surpass it.
That I believe, because they can do super sampling, which is a brute force method of anti-aliasing, where you render at a resolution larger than your screen, and you reduce it to your screen size. And that's, like, if you want something to look great in Photoshop, I know that's how you do it. In real time, it probably looks just as good.
They talked about HDR being in this console. If you have an HDR screen, great.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a 1 terabyte hard drive. That was pretty much it for the specs that we got from this thing. It's not a true 4K console.
Why not?
Well, I mean, because because the GPU doesn't seem powered up enough to handle the 4K.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, assume that, I think it is going to obviously output 4K. I just don't know what that's going to mean to developers, if they're going to have to actually scale back a little bit, or if things will be up-resed. Maybe they'll render somewhere between 1080 and 4K and then up-res it to that. I bet it'll look better, but my problem is, like, the difference between 1080 and 4K. I have a 4K TV. I bought a new TV because our old TV died, and it's 4K TVs are they're what you buy now. Like, if you go to Best Buy, that's what's on the wall, and it's not the difference that DVD to Blu-ray was. It's beautiful. But we've passed the point of diminishing returns after 1080p.
Though, to be honest, they showed some demos. Mm-hmm. They showed a Spider-Man game, Watch Dogs 2, which is set in San Francisco. Spider-Man especially looked great.
Well, how can you really tell?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was watching on Twitch, so I was like, how can I really tell?
That's the problem with these technologies. Both 4K and HDR are hard to convey over any streaming network, because I guarantee everyone's watching it on 1080p or less, and no one's watching it in HDR because the streams don't support that. So it's interesting that they would do these A/B comparisons. And at home, we're like, what? I don't see it.
Buy now, find out later.
Presumably, the people in the audience could see something, and when you play it in person, you'll see. But this is not unlike VR in the fact that you can't demonstrate this over existing streaming tech.
Speaking of VR, did they say anything about PSVR at all?
They only said that that the extra power of the Pro would be at the developer's disposal to do whatever they wanted. So the same type of things, better pixel clarity, or higher frame rates. Now that's an important thing. Like, if they can, you need that. I think they're rendering at 90 on the PlayStation VR. You need those frames, so that'll be a good thing. I could see a lot of people upgrading if they are into the PlayStation VR, but it won't require it. So PlayStation VR will work fine on PlayStation 4, at least, as fine as whatever Sony says is good enough.
$400, which is what we thought it would come out at.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did like is there is a firmware update going out to all the other PS4s for HDR support
Next week. So that's great, actually, because my TV supposedly supports some level of HDR. I'll be curious to see what that means. And they're calling this feature of the PlayStation Pro forward compatibility, where some of the older games will be re-released or repatched so that they take advantage of the new tech.
So nothing surprising. We knew all of this information before this event happened. I will say, though, Apple, I think, should take a little page out of PlayStation, because this was like a half hour.
Hit the ground running.
It was just like, hey,
done.
here's the new PlayStation. Here's the new PlayStation Pro. We'll see you later. It was like, I felt like that Apple event could have been condensed in the same way.
My God.
Didn't Apple used to do much shorter, like snappier? Like, this is starting to turn into like, I don't know, like a Microsoft event, where it's like 5 hours of like, and now here's our new Windows system.
I felt like the intro was particularly Microsofty when Tim Cook was in the car with the late night host.
Yeah.
It was just very corny.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was dad humor.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
this is the dad humor era at Apple, which is, it's not a good look for them.
Well
put. So yeah, I guess that's it. Are you going to buy one of these new PlayStations?
Nope.
All right.
I mean, I say for the same reason I mentioned last week. We're in the 4.5 territory with both of these. I'm going to wait a year.
Annalee?
I'm waiting.
All right. You are but you might get PlayStation 5 maybe?
I might.
Jump on?
It depends. Yeah.
If there's Temple Run on it, you're there.
Pokemon Go, man. I'll just like tuck the whole PlayStation in my backpack. It'll be great.
Now it's time for a moment of science. I am so happy to have Annalee here for Moment of Science, because she's going to drop better science knowledge than me. not to set it up.
Yeah.
But we have a lot
ready.
of stuff to
I know.
go through this week.
So much news.
Hey, when you lose stuff in the verse, there's only one person to call up, or one agency to call up when you're looking for it, and that's NASA.
Or ESA.
Or ESA. Yeah, okay, fine.
Or
ESA.
JAXA.
Yeah, fine.
Did you just abbreviate universe as verse?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
Firefly.
Hello.
No, I don't remember that from Firefly. Is that true?
What?
In the verse?
Yeah,
All
the
right,
verse.
We're going to stop
going
talking
out
about
into
this
the
right
black.
been
You
too
know,
long.
man,
Well-
yeah, it's time to rewatch that.
So this week, ESA announced they had found something they had lost, our lovable lander Philae, which kind of bounced around on a comet. Did you see the pictures, Annalee?
I did see the pictures. It was fantastic. It was great because a lot of the pictures that they're showing, which are from, Rosetta, one of Rosetta's cameras, they're sort of like those pictures you see when people say, we found a face on Mars. There's a lot of circles and arrows and like, yes, this is definitely it. But it's real. It really is Philae. It's fantastic because we didn't have any visual confirmation of what we knew from getting information back and all the sensor readings that we got back from Philae. And so we kind of we thought we knew where it was, but we didn't know for sure. This was the last possible moment that we could have gotten this photograph. And it's fantastic.
It's such good drama, isn't it? It's like we get closure at the last
Yeah.
possible
Space
moment.
agencies are the best at drama. They're like the new TNT. They know drama. So what was amazing is we did figure, based on telemetry, that it was in a shaded spot. It
Yes.
was getting no sun because there was essentially no power being delivered to the lander. And we had an idea based on the fact that we knew it had bounced, that it had gone somewhere. So they were looking basically in these like crevasses, canyons. I don't know what the technical term is on a
Crack.
comet.
Yeah. I think they said canyon maybe was the term they were using, but it was on kind of the smaller chunk. There was sort of a bigger side and a smaller side to the comet. And yeah, we found it. It was literally wedged into a crack. And we call that ground truthing, when we actually see on the ground with our eyes or with our visual sensors, in this case with our robot, that we can confirm the data that we've gotten that was not visual. So it's a great triumph. And also it'll help for future missions like this, where we have now more confidence in our ability to kind of figure out where a lander is based on telemetry that is not visual.
For those who are wondering about Philae itself, goodbye. I mean, this was just visual confirmation that
It's not coming
it is
home.
dead and just stuck there.
Yeah.
So unless something was to happen to that comet, Philae is just there.
Even if it were to get sunlight now and somehow manage to recharge,
But it's
Rosetta
not-
won't be there for it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's sad but true. But this is what happens in space.
Well, let's keep the sad going then, because we have to talk about the SpaceX explosion, which was
so
very devastating.
sad.
That happened was it Friday of last week that it happened? Friday or Saturday?
Yes.
It was,
Okay.
yeah.
And as they were filling propellant and fuel into the vehicle, it exploded. And you can see footage of the explosion where a few days later, we still haven't gotten much of an explanation yet, nor should we expect it.
Yeah, I love that Elon Musk referred to it as a very fast fire, not an explosion. There actually is a technical difference between a very fast fire and an explosion, but that would have really only mattered if there were people around, because with a fast fire, you can eject people more quickly, or more. You can actually eject them; they won't just die instantly.
We should note no one was hurt.
That's right.
The Amos 6 satellite, which was a Facebook satellite, lack of technical terminology there, was lost during the explosion. And but more importantly, we don't know what happened to the launch pad.
Yeah, we don't. It was something it was a very standard test that's done before a rocket is launched. What was unusual is that they actually had the payload on the rocket, which they were doing just to save time. It kind of sounds like everybody was feeling a little bit overconfident. Maybe it would have been better to just put in a giant sandbag that was the same weight as their payload. And so, obviously, SpaceX has learned from this, but unfortunately, it's a pretty expensive lesson. Facebook had been preparing for this mission for over a year and a half, and it's quite sad because it was a humanitarian effort. It wasn't a Facebook kind of just wanting to be greedy and do something terrible. They were actually trying to bring internet to sub-Saharan Africa. So that sucks for a lot of reasons that we lost that satellite.
The other thing that I think is interesting that you bring up is why did they sort of put the payload on?
Yeah.
Because initial reactions right from the explosion is most reporters, and as with any other breaking news, it's usually wrong. What you get, what you see right away.
Wait, Twitter isn't giving me correct information.
But most of the reporters, including a lot of like the most experienced space reporters out there, were saying the payload isn't on there because that's the way it's usually done.
Yeah, it's normally not there.
But we're in this system right now where there's scheduling for various launches, and there's one this weekend. The Osiris mission from NASA is going up from Cape Canaveral as well. There's such a tight window that you can feel like the rush to get your window right. There isn't a lot of room for failures, and I think that's actually, depending on what the finding is, that's the real story here. Is how is this going to affect future launches? Because once you miss a window like this and you have to rebuild, if there's something really wrong with the launch pad, it's going to start pushing out everyone.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, but if you look at the flip side, kind of what you were saying about how, there's all of these launches coming up, and you can see why they were kind of cutting corners and wanting to just shave a few hours even off of prep time. This is just another piece of evidence that, commercial space flight really is starting to come into its own, and that you only have an accident like this because there's so much going on, because there's so many launches and there's so many satellites that are, being used by private industry. And so I'm not trying to say this is good. I'm just trying to say this is kind of a sign of the times in terms of where we're at with space flight. So hopefully we'll solve this launch pad problem, the mystery of the launch pad. And next time we won't destroy satellites that are trying to bring humanitarian stuff to Africa.
And usually we're used to hearing information really quickly from SpaceX and Elon Musk's Twitter, feed. I think it's going to be a while before we hear much about this.
I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in sort of launch pad mechanics. It sounded to me like they just wanted to be very careful about figuring it all out before letting us know. I wouldn't be surprised if we heard relatively soon.
There's also the liability issue with the actual payload. They're being asked to pay $50 million due to this incident.
Yeah.
Of course, they have billions in contracts lined up, so it might be a small drop in the bucket, but still.
That's an interesting point, though, because as commercial spaceflight becomes more and more common, are we going to start seeing more questions around this liability? Because this company, the Israeli company that built the satellite, they built it assuming that then they would get money from Facebook and another group that was licensing the satellite, right? So they're waiting to get that money, and they have to get it launched to get that money. So if SpaceX's launch pad screws it up, that's an interest. I'll let the space lawyers figure it out.
I think that's probably going to be one of the more interesting stories that's going to come out of this. Let's get the rest of our bad news out of the way. Actually, I think it's heroic news. We're going to talk about the Duke whistleblower case before circling back to more positive things. This is actually one of the more interesting inside baseball cases in science. A whistleblower at Duke has accused a biologist, and this is a former colleague of the biologist's name, of falsifying data in grant applications that brought the university $200 million. And this is an interesting case because we don't have a ton of whistleblower cases in science related to fraudulent data. So this is sort of a first of its kind case. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly a first of its kind, but it's close. And so this person is protected under I can't say that word.
Whistleblower laws.
Yes. So this is one of the more fascinating legal cases in science to watch progress, because Duke could be on the hook for paying back this money times a multiple. It's usually about 3 multiple to pay back to the U.S. government if they're found to have been negligent in this in some way. But it also underscores, I work at a university, how is this going to be perceived by a lot of scientific institutions about the oversight they put in on researchers putting in grants?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There have been a few other cases. There was a case a few years ago at Harvard with a primate researcher who had faked a lot of data. But the difference is
really bad.
It was a real, and there was just a lot of like, oh, I recorded it, but I guess I put it in my desk and I threw my desk away. I mean, there was a lot of goofy stuff. But the difference is that this is a biologist who is doing biomedical research. And so there's a bigger impact for the public, whereas primate research is usually just basic research. So there's not a big impact. And so I think when you start seeing people getting, even if it's a small grant, because $200 million is actually a relatively small grant in some ways, this is, I mean, I think that the general public looks at that and says, wait, so somebody's faking medical data, and, what does that say about the healthcare that we're going to get down the line?
Was the Harvard case actually protected under whistleblower laws? I don't
No,
recall.
it wasn't a whistleblower case,
Yeah.
but it was a similar case of faked data, and it was brought by a former student. So yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, this is the first case, because the whistleblower laws mean that the person who brought the case, their identity is protected, so they're anonymous.
And they have special legal protections beyond their identity being protected.
Yeah. It's interesting because, of course, anyone who works with this researcher obviously knows who this person is. So it's actually, even though they are protected by whistleblower laws, it's very brave to come forward, because your connections to your advisor, your connections to your colleagues really determine whether you get jobs and grants.
Almost assuredly, people inside know who this is.
Yeah. And because of that, like I said, I think it took a lot of courage for this person to come forward, because, that's a lot of money that was coming in from those grants. And that person who came forward could have benefited from that money, and they chose to do the right thing.
I would like to think in academia, a whistleblower like this would be more of a hero and embraced and easily re-employed.
That
That's
is
a good
not how academia works.
You are a funny guy.
I wish that were true. Like, I would love to believe that as well. I wish that academia worked like the Federation or something like that on Star Trek. But no, I mean, there's a lot of, people greasing each other's palms with grant money, and, a lot of corruption goes on. And especially if you're working for a researcher who brings in very lucrative grants, you're depending on that grant money to live. So it's very hard for you to, if you see your PI, your principal investigator, doing something fraudulent, you're kind of screwing yourself over too by turning them in. You really have to have a strong ethical sense and, really feel like something is going wrong before you're going to step forward.
All right, we got to shift to positive realm.
Okay.
So strike one for the giant pandas. Victory.
Yes.
We did it.
You want to talk about the giant pandas?
Giant pandas are no longer on the endangered list, which is amazing, because it's been a long time that we've been concerned about giant pandas, and they're so cute. So everyone is excited.
Cute
it's like
is an important
when we
part of
say, like, okay, here in California, like, the horned lizard is endangered, and I don't see anyone anxious to, like, you're not going to get a cute picture of a horned lizard. I mean, I think they're kind of cute, but
the numbers are up to over 2,000 giant panda cubs that are back in the system. And just because I apparently have to be a downer, there are warnings, though, that climate change is going to reduce their bamboo habitat. So they may not be off this list for a long period of time, but at least right now there's short-term positive news on this. Well, I'm going to call that a victory.
yes.
All right, this is the story I've been waiting for this entire moment of science. Viewers that have been watching this for a while may recall a few weeks ago talking about World War III in the ant world. And one of the best stories on that was written by Annalee and ours. And now we have an even more bizarre ant story.
Yes. So the previous story, if you recall, was about Argentine ants, which are an invasive species throughout the world. So this is not an invasive species. These are not ants who are coming to get you. These are wood ants, friendly friends of the forest. They create huge nests, just enormous, sometimes networks of nests. And
Can you
this
define enormous?
like several hectares sometimes. So
Can you define hectare?
So look it up. Why is it the geoscientists use hectare all the time? It drives me nuts. I just want can you say square kilometers? I don't know. So they're
Hectare's
quite
10,000 square meters.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, they can get quite large. So, in this beautiful forest in Poland, a group of wood ants set up a very giant colony. Unfortunately, they built their colony on top of a former nuclear weapons bunker built by the Soviets. And they built it over top.
They didn't know.
They
can't read the signs.
Poor innocent ants. And it was actually a hidden bunker. Even humans didn't really know about it, and it was off limits legally. Unfortunately for these ants, they built on top of a ventilation shaft that had a covering over it, but because the ants were now covering that covering, it rusted away. So every year during the phase of the ants' expansion, like they kind of have periods where they expand and periods where they shrink, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of ants fall down this ventilation shaft, 5-meter ventilation shaft, into this bunker, and they survive. And they've created this incredible, depressing, dystopian ant colony down there. One hesitates even to call it a colony, because even though it has about the same number of ants in it as a typical colony, like up to maybe 1 million ants, they're not reproducing. It's just all...
There's no queen, right?
There's no queen as far as we know. The researchers, was a group of Polish and Finnish researchers who found it. They actually say very... they have this sort of circumspect moment in their paper where they talk about how there was a semi-legal way that they got into the bunker. And they were apparently led there by another group of zoologists who were studying some bats that live in this bunker as well. So animals have taken up residence there. The sad thing is, so these ants have no queen, so they're not able to reproduce, but they're doing all the typical things that a colony would do. They're building up a mound. They are keeping it clean. They're hunting for food. No one knows what they're eating. These researchers spent 2 years observing them and could not find a source of food. But they are dying in numbers that are a bit higher than what you'd expect. And so the thing that's so tragic, and there's great pictures of this that you can see online, is that the entire area around this enormous bunker nest, this trapped nest, is just surrounded by an ant graveyard, because ants, they're very tidy. And so if an ant dies in the colony, they take it outside and they put it on a debris pile. And this pile of dead ants actually has created its own ecosystem. It's so big that now there's mites living in, mites that typically live on ants are now living in this graveyard of dead ants. So one speculation is that maybe the ants are living on the mites that are eating their dead ant friends, which is
awesome.
It's like cannibalism at one remove, right?
Yeah,
like
I don't know if
eating,
it's awesome, but it's interesting.
We're eating the bugs that eat our dead. So that's what's happening down there. And so it's just this really poignant story about how human intervention in the environment has transformed not just human society. The Soviet bunkers were obviously very transformative, and the Soviet occupation in Poland was transformative, but it's also transforming insect society. And it's kind of a nice little microcosm of, just trying to understand how is it that humans impact the environment? Well, here's a very, very specific example of how we've basically created ant hell.
It reminded me of the book, The World Without Us. Who wrote it? Daniel Wiseman or somebody. About how if humans just disappeared, what would happen? And it just brought up a lot of pictures that came out in that book. We'll link to Annalee's story in the show notes. It's an incredible tale.
Just a quick question. The fall was 500 meters?
No, the ventilation shaft is 5 meters, and then they fall, a couple more meters to the floor. Okay. And when I published the story, a lot of readers had questions about, well, why can't the ants just climb back up? And 5 meters is in a vertical metal shaft. That's a lot for an ant.
If you're 5 millimeters long.
Yeah, the ants are able to scale the walls, and they are crawling a little bit on the ceiling, but basically they can't get back up. And the researchers said that enough ants are just raining down out of this shaft. They observed it, and they said that's what's replenishing the colony down there. So it's just every year they get new new members of their death
What's
colony.
the lifespan of a typical ant?
So wood ants apparently typically live for about 3 years, and the researchers speculate that these ants may only be living for about a year because, again, where is their food coming from? We don't know.
All right.
Weirdest story of the week. We have one last story. It is summer here in San Francisco. It may seem like fall everywhere else in the northern hemisphere, but September and October, warmest months of the year here in San Francisco, and clothes are the worst. Am I right?
You are right.
Yes,
So,
especially pants.
yeah. A lot of studies have shown that humans wearing clothes, because clothes absorb radiation and keep it trapped near your skin, are about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, important to note, warmer than those without. And don't worry, I'm not shedding any clothes here just to stay cool, so don't worry, listeners. And so there's been a race to develop new forms of fabric that could potentially be used for clothing that keeps you cooler. For the longest time, we've known about one material that has done this sort of well. Plastic wrap has always done a great job of transmitting infrared radiation back out. But the problem is it also absorbs visible light and keeps that trapped. So it doesn't really work. But the idea of plastics basically being a barrier to infrared radiation, or at least allowing it to go through, has been an interesting idea. So researchers this week came out with a paper showing they made a fabric, quote unquote, out of a spun polyethylene component that has these really small nano-sized pores in it that was small enough to essentially let out the IR radiation so it didn't stay trapped against your skin, but also, or large enough to let that out, but small enough to reflect out and scatter visible light as it hit it. So this material appears white because it's scattering all of the light. And when they put on sort of test conditions of this fabric, it basically was almost imperceptible temperature difference in terms of...
So sorry.
Yeah, there is a video with some 70s music that shows a little bit of the temperature gradient, and it showed almost imperceptible, 0.2 degrees centigrade difference in terms of the temperature utilizing this clothing.
Wow, so it's like the ultimate technical clothing.
Yeah,
So,
and you would say, like, what's the point? It's like a couple degrees. What's the big deal? And their sort of like example of this, and believe it for what you will, is that if you work in a big office building where like 40% of their energy comes from sort of cooling and maintaining the temperature inside, if all of the humans inside were wearing clothing that took down their comfortable temperature by 2 degrees, that's 2 degrees less they have to heat or cool that. Yeah, that face is about right.
I'm imagining like sort of like the space 1999 outfits that they wore. Those were probably made of this material. They were all white.
Yeah, everyone has to be
very
white.
groovy. So everybody has to be wearing their space uniform. I don't know. I have a hydrophobic T-shirt. I don't know if you've tried one of those, which is another one of these crazy kind of material science creations, and it worked the first time. It did shed water, and it did shed some sriracha that I squirted on it just to test. And then I washed it once, and it stopped working.
Did it say not to wash it?
No, it's a T-shirt.
Right.
It didn't say not to wash it.
It's a hydrophobic T-shirt.
I know, but the assumption is you're gonna wash it. You're not gonna.
How does that work? You can wash it in water?
Yeah, I
Right.
washed it in water, and it should have shed the water. It should have just been like, forget it, I can't be washed. But then it stopped being as hydrophobic. Yeah, maybe it became a little hydrophilic, and it started to turn this kind of weird bruise color. So it wasn't
only in pockets, or just
the whole. It was just a plain white T-shirt. It didn't have a. That's an interesting pocket question. Only in pockets. So this is a thing that happens to pockets. Anyway, so I don't know if this works as well as the hydrophobic T-shirt. All I'm going to say is don't wash it. Yeah,
We're not at that point.
You're not sweating. It's wicking away all your sweat. So just hang it up at night, and when you go to the Starship in the morning, just put it on again.
Do you remember Freezy Freakers?
No.
Freezy,
What?
Is that?
Freezy Freakers. They were these gloves that you'd take out in wintertime, and they would images would appear on them.
What?
When they got cold. I love these things. Like when I was a kid, that was like the biggest thing. It's like Trapper Keepers and Freezy Freakers.
Wow.
Yeah. Like that was
like a mood ring in reverse.
Exactly.
Nice.
I can't think of a better segue into the VR Minute.
The VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
Well, let's see. What do we got? We got Vanishing Realms Update 2 is live. Did you ever play Vanishing Realms?
No.
You got to play
Me either.
Vanishing Realms. You haven't played that yet?
No.
All right, so that's a Vive game made by a former Valve guy. He like worked on all the early Half-Life games. God, I'm blanking on his name right now. But like one guy made this entire beta of a game, and it was very impressive. They showed it off at one of the early Vive release events. Super cool, kind of a dungeon crawler teleport game, but it's hack and slash, and he's revamped quite a lot of it. So now there's a lot more difficulty there. The monsters, you can adjust how aggressive they are, and supposedly like he's put quite a lot of work into this ground up. It's got a lot of attention on Reddit. Highly recommend checking it out. It's the game that my 9-year-old played. It's probably the most fun I've seen him have in VR because he was terrified in this dungeon of these bad monsters.
Nice.
And
That's how you rate it. How scared are you, son?
well, like you don't get terrified on a flat screen, which you're playing on a 24-inch monitor. It's very removed. But when you're in that dungeon, and to see a 9-year-old who is so alert and aware of the world go into VR and experience this kind of fear. But it was great because the monsters wouldn't attack until you get a little closer, and then he would switch. Like finally, when they started to attack, he switched into instinct mode, and he would fight the monster. And when he killed his first monster, I've never seen him so elated. He went upstairs. Like my wife was like, "What happened down there? I've never seen him like this. He's so happy and proud of himself." I think that there's definitely room for, getting over certain phobias in VR, just based on that one subjective experience. Feral Rights has been announced to be coming out just next week, September 13th. Now, this is a big deal. This is Insomniac's second game that they've released for VR. This is going to be on the Oculus Store, and it is a third-person, looks like an adventure game, not unlike, is it Chronos? What am I thinking of? Have you
the other Insomniac game?
No. It's another third-person adventure game. You played the first Insomniac game, right? What was that?
I'm trying to remember the name of it.
You played it. You liked it.
The why am I so bad at Googling things or remembering anything?
Insomniac VR. But so they have 3 games that they're doing in VR. This Edge of Nowhere is the one that you
Edge
played.
of Nowhere, yes. Edge of Nowhere I loved.
That was also a third-person, kind of horror, like thriller-ish adventure game, right?
Yes, and the only problem with that game is some of the game mechanics got repetitive, but the suspense was amazing, and the storytelling was great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would expect great things from Feral Rights because they've had even more time to work on it. This is all leading up to the one that I'm most excited about, which is the one that's touch-enabled, called The Unspoken.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I wish Feral Rights was touch-enabled. Because
Well, yeah, but touch isn't out yet, so if you're going to get a VR game from Insomniac now, it's going to be Gamepad. So that's exciting that they were just announced out of the blue. It's coming out next week. I bet that'll be good.
Any hardware news?
Well, not really. There is a chip now because Valve has released, they've said, okay, we want third parties to start working on Lighthouse support for, the Vive technology. So now there's a company that is going to be selling little tiny PCBs, circuit boards populated with different components that allow you to incorporate your own sensor
you can
tech.
Make your own lighthouses.
Well, you can't make the lighthouses,
Yeah.
but you make the sensors. So all these little IR laser sensors that they have mounted all around the Vive headset and controllers, you'll now be able to buy. You can buy those sensors already, but they're making it easy. They're putting on circuit boards that are easily breadboardable, so you can prototype with them, easily wire things up.
Is Valve licensing this out, or is it just kind of like, oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. Valve is kind of helping people do it. They just want people to make these things. They want their version of VR to become sort of crowd-sourced in terms of like the development as quickly as possible. So they're hoping HTC is the first, I think, of many developers who embrace their technology, and other people will follow suit. And this is just part of that. So this is now independents can buy these chips. I think like the chip, there's gonna be 2 versions of the chip that you can buy of these boards. One that's a little more populated with components that assist you in making it even easier. That's gonna be like $7 a chip in quantities of 10. And then there's the other one, which is like a bucket chip if you buy them in quantities of 50. So it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, eventually this is going to get to the point where it's on Adafruit and like just people are buying these things and hacking up Arduinos and stuff to be VR.
Anything that you're thinking about making?
I think Norm had it right when like the first things out are going to be tracked keyboards and mice. Like that would be great if you could just see that in VR.
If there was a great game, I would build more tracked something like Track Sword.
Yeah. Well, like if you have these little components, like these are basically pixels, like in a sense of like if you could just buy these things and attach them to whatever you want, and then have some very easy way to configure them in VR for whatever object that you want it to become. I think that there's a lot of potential.
We got to do this as a project.
I wanna attach one to my cat. Yeah. I think that would be great.
Yeah. Is that there's a certain game you have in mind?
I mean, there's so many things.
Every game?
Yeah, every game. Just how do you, it's just sort of the playing with the cat game, but turn the cat into other things, right? My cats are a little bit evil, so I think it would be great.
I'm not sure my cat would stay in the tracked volume for more than a few seconds.
Right. You'd have to lock them into a room, basically. Right. So.
Or how about the wandering ally that like comes in from time to time?
Yeah. I love that idea.
That would be fun to set a cat loose in Vanishing Realms. Just see what happened.
Yeah.
So we got Connect coming up now. Is only a month away. We're hoping to be in attendance. Norm, I'm sure, can answer whether or not we will be when he gets back. But I'm excited for that. We'll have to get a lot of...
I think we'll have a longer VR minute next week because Norm did a lot of VR related stuff on the Icebreaker. So I'll be interested to hear what he said about that.
Can you say anything that he's worked on VR-wise in the Icebreaker?
I can't because I don't know.
Okay.
Testing this week. Hey, what have you guys been testing?
Well, Norm, I got on the Vive the other day, which I do kind of infrequently. I use the Oculus a little more often because it's at my main PC. The Vive is kind of like a deal to set up. But I did it, went through a bunch of apps that I've been told I should check out, and ones that just look cool on Steam. One that I checked out that, for whatever reason, it's like I don't know if you go on the Reddit or probably more our Vive. But if you go on the Vive Reddit, it's just every day there's a lot of talk about this game called Onward, which is a military sim game. And it is interesting because they have a lot of simulated movement mechanics. So like if you want to reload your gun, you actually have to...
You have to do that with the controller?
Yeah, you like drop out the clip and then you insert a new one. If like the heavy machine guns, you have to lift up this big piece, pull your ammo over, put it back down, and then cock it.
All the fun of military sim games come to life.
Well, yeah.
Reloading.
Because if it's a big change from traditional shooters where you're pressing Y. And that means that if you are good at that stuff, you can reload faster. It means you're not as vulnerable. And so it's an interesting kind of element to that. You pull pins out of grenades and you cook them and you throw them when you're ready. So it's interesting. It has people talking is the traversal mechanic. So basically, you move through the space by aiming your hand, and then you press on the touchpad, and you move in that direction, whichever direction your hand is moving in or pointed towards. And people are reporting that they get motion sick in other games, but not in this game. So there's something going on there where there might be something with the hand movement that improves the motion sickness. But there are still a lot of people getting motion sick. Like the hope is that we can find a traversal mechanic that isn't teleporting, that works for everybody. And a lot of people were kind of hoping this might be it. I don't think we're there yet, but it is definitely has a lot of interesting mechanics. The other game that I tried that I really quite do like is called Bracket NX. It's just a demo right now, but if you have a Vive, it's free on Steam. I highly recommend you check it out. It's kind of like a racquetball, futuristic. You're in a sphere, and all around you are these hexagons some of them are green, and you have to hit the ball with your racket into these green things. The physics simulation, it's like 0G, but the trajectories that you hit the ball in feel very realistic, and you can put English on it. The faster you hit it, like you get better effects, and the ball will hit multiple, hexagons. Very cool. Highly recommend checking that out. I can't wait for that full game. Those are the things I've been trying.
You saw my Mayor McCheese outfit. I've been doing a lot of work on cosplay this week.
How long did it take you to make that?
It took me, when I first put it together, just about like 3 or 4 days to put everything together.
Wow.
And maintenance on it is hard because I sweat in it. And so you have to figure out how to sanitize. So spray bottles of vodka are my friend. But I think you've seen that, and I'll be coming out with a review of the Jewel coming up as soon as Norm gets back on the sous vide machines. Let's talk about a trip to a lost civilization or colony.
Yeah, it was a lost civilization or city, really. So earlier this summer, I realized a long-standing dream, and I joined an archaeological dig at Cahokia, which is a city that is on the east side of the Mississippi in Illinois. It's right across the river from St. Louis.
Sorry.
And it was the biggest city in North America about 1,000 years ago. The group of people who built it are long gone. We don't have any real understanding of what they called the city or what their belief systems were. It's called Cahokia because a later group of Indians who lived there called it Cahokia. And they had the city with about 30,000 people. They built massive earthen mounds that were like pyramids but flat on top, and built these entirely by hand. And so now archaeologists are trying to figure out how big the city was, what life was like in the regular parts of the city. We kind of have an understanding of, the main part of the city where they had this enormous mound, which is now called Monk's Mound for a variety of silly reasons. We understand a lot about the really large structures there, but the question is, what was it like for the 200 years that this city existed? And so two archaeologists, Sarah Bears and Melissa Baltus, were there with a group of students excavating an area that they thought would be just a typical neighborhood. And they do this they do magnetometry over a large area, and they look to see anomalies.
So it's not how Indy did it. Modern digs are a little more tech savvy.
They're a little more tech savvy. And the thing about the city of Cahokia that is really amazing is that they built entirely with basically wood and clay. So there's no remains, like there's not like crumbling rocks or like old tombs with giant, statues in them or anything like that. And so in order to find remains, you really do have to go with a magnetometer. And one of the ways that the people who lived there kind of conducted rituals was they would burn things. So when you find magnetic signatures of burns, that's a really good place to start digging. And just like the astronomers who looked for ground truthing with the philae, archaeologists also call this ground truthing when they do magnetometry and they're like, whoa, look at this burned crap. This must be a neighborhood. And then they actually dig in an incredibly anal retentive way, measuring everything very carefully and taking lots of pictures. And so while I was there, what they found was that this seemingly sleepy neighborhood was actually probably kind of a spiritual center. And they found this incredible place where it had been some kind of... Archaeologists don't want to name things because they don't want to project onto it. So they don't want to say it was a temple. They don't want to say it was a religious icon. They want to just say it was a special use house. Special use. So the special use house was full of rare rocks, beautiful pottery, statues, and everything had been burned. We actually found the remains of a very delicate knitted textile of some kind. And the only way that they could even find that was that it had burned, and the burn had kind of left a pattern in the mud. And so what it looked like was the people had dug out a big pit, lined it with textile, and put a bunch of valuable stuff in there, including things like projectile points, because arrowhead, we're not sure we want to say arrowhead, so it's projectile points. And all of these other valuable possessions. And so I got to watch archaeologists dancing around in the mud, because every time they would find something, and it is very, very muddy there would be a kind of, happy dance of, oh my God, I can't believe we found this pottery here. This pottery comes from really far away. So what that meant was that they actually have found a very valuable spot to keep digging. And while they were there, they also were able to continue to disprove a very pervasive myth about Cahokia, which is that it was destroyed by a flood. And there is no evidence of that. And they did a lot of boreholes, sampling of the ground to basically pull out big, long sort of cores from the ground to see if there were layers of sediment that you'd expect from a big flood. There's nothing like that. So the reason why people left Cahokia, abandoned the city about 200 years after it was founded, remains kind of a mystery. There was probably no big, problem like a flood or anything like that. It kind of seems like people just got sick of it and may have gotten sick of the governance of the city. There's a lot of evidence that about 100 years into the city's life, everyone changed the way their houses looked. It's really interesting. Like when you
got an HOA and basically was like,
yeah,
F this.
Everybody changed it. So houses had at one time been oriented north-south, and then they all are suddenly oriented in different directions. And again, we don't know for sure why that is or how people, was it a top-down thing where suddenly the people in charge were saying, all right, everybody fix your house, or if it was more of like a style, like an like an architectural style.
Do we know what religion this culture subscribed to?
Not really. I mean, it was probably related to, in some ways, to other native religions, so probably animistic. They do have a lot of sculptures that involve depictions of animals and farming and corn. There's a really amazing statue that was discovered at Cahokia that's a woman, and she's plowing the back of a snake, and the snake is turning into corn. And it's just this amazing image of, this kind of deadly creature that's being turned into, corn was their most valuable crop.
But I don't recall snakes being that common in that area of the U.S.
No,
Maybe.
there's snakes, and it's Illinois, so there's snakes, and they would have definitely seen them around and known that they were poisonous. There's a lot of snake imagery, and especially as you go further south. And of course, there's lots of imagery of birds and fish, and a lot of the other food that they would have grown. I mean, they were farmers. So yeah, they definitely, and they also clearly were influenced by cosmology. They have a structure there called Woodhenge, which is basically like Stonehenge, where they're tracking solstices. And of course, the wood is gone, but we can still see the post holes where the wood used to be. So there's a reconstruction of Woodhenge. If you ever want to visit Cahokia State Park, highly recommended. You can see the reconstruction of Woodhenge. You can walk up to the top of Monk's Mound, which is a pretty profound experience. It's really, really amazing. You can see all of St. Louis from the top. And so it was a fantastic trip, and I learned a lot about how archaeology works, the nitty gritty.
Have you written about your trip already on ours?
I'm actually I'm writing about it now. It should be up in the next week or two, so you can look for it there.
Cool. We'll link to it for sure.
Thanks.
This is a great a moment to talk about this because Adam was in Las Vegas on his recent trip, and he met up with Sarah Parchak. I'm saying that right. The archaeologist that won the TED Prize for locating a lost city using essentially satellite imagery. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to be probably talking about her. I had no idea they knew each other because one of her story of essentially modern archaeology and finding a lost city is one of the best stories I heard last year in science.
And recently as well at Angkor Wat, which was another great civilization, actually right around the time of Cahokia, about 1,000 years ago, the Khmer civilization, we now, there just was a story that came out this past year about using LiDAR to actually map the city because like Cahokia, the city had been made mostly of wood. So it was really hard to reconstruct how big it had been. People thought, well, Angkor Wat, it's kind of big, but now that we've looked at it with LiDAR, and you can actually, if you Google LiDAR Angkor Wat online, you'll find pictures of it. We now know that the city grid was enormous, and probably about 1 million people lived there, which would have made it the biggest city in the world, most awesome civilization of the year, 1100. So, wow. Cambodia kicking ass.
Annalee, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
You are an eloquent, intelligent person. You've doubled our scientific legitimacy.
I would say multiplying any number times 0 is still 0.
Yeah, I think I've lowered your gaming legitimacy by a significant amount too. So.
I hated on one-tap games. You're fine.
Sure.
Temple Run forever.
Do you have anything to plug? Stuff that you're doing coming up?
I just the Cahokia stuff. I'm working on a book actually about lost cities that will probably not be out for a couple years, but this is all part of my research for that. So.
Aren't you speaking at that Dent the Future thing?
That's true. I'm speaking at Dent Space, which is September 22nd.
21st and 22nd.
21st and 22nd. I'm there on the 22nd.
It's in San Francisco. For those that want to come, a lot of friends of Tested are speaking, including our own Simone Yetch is speaking. Mary Roach is there. A number of other authors. Natalie Bathalia from the Kepler mission was a lead on that. It's an incredible lineup of speakers, and we'll put a link to that in our show notes. Anything else coming up? Where can people find you?
People can find me on Ars Technica, or you can always find me on my own website, AnnaleeNewitz.com. And
Annalee on the Twitters.
Yes, Annalee in on the Twitters.
Awesome. I don't have much to promote.
Wasn't there something on Colbert this week we should talk
Oh,
about?
yeah. Simone was on Colbert this week. She was on Colbert on Friday night. You can find a link. I'll put it in the show notes, but it's up on YouTube and on the CBS website. She forced Steven to use the lipstick robot.
Good for her.
Good for everybody.
We're super happy for her.
Good for everyone. You have anything coming up, sir?
I don't. Nope. You can find me on the Twitter at Jerware. You are at Science Quiche.
At Science Quiche. I'm busily readying the Bay Area Science Festival, which I work on, which is at the end of October, which features the Tested live show. And more on that soon.
Will Smith is actually, speaking of live shows, he's at XOXO right now, and there he's planning to do a live shoot in Foo VR, which will be the second major, Foo VR shoot. He's doing it Friday, so tomorrow if you're listening to this on Thursday. And hopefully that's not going to be broadcast live on the internet, but they will have a taping of it, and they'll be releasing that soon. I can't wait to check that out and see how that goes.
Awesome.
Annalee, who are you on Twitter?
Annalee N.
Annalee N. ANNALEEN.
Norm will be back next week, we think, if a polar bear didn't get him.
There's a great shot of him, of a polar bear he shot. But not shot, like shot with a phone. If you, I think Tested retweeted it. If not, look for Google Danica.
Look for Norm with like a severed bear head.
It's like, I can't wait to hear the story behind this bear. Apparently he was not that far away from it.
Wow.
Yeah, so stories to come next week, no doubt. And we will see you then.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Tested.
That was awesome.
I got new glasses for VR too. That makes me look extra nerdy. Wow. Tested.